Evening, church. Thankful that we're able to be together tonight. If you want to turn your Bibles to John, the first chapter, verses 43 through 51 is where we'll be in just a few moments. But I want to start really with a song that I don't. If you know it, I'd love for you to sing with me. I really don't want to do a solo. I should ask maybe before I start singing it. How many of you know the Apostles' song? Jesus called them one by one. Do y'all know that one? No? I see some hands. Y'all going to have to help me out, okay? Jesus called them one by one, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Next came Philip, Thomas too, Matthew and Bartholomew. James, the one they call the less, Simon, also Thaddeus, the 12th apostle Judas made. Jesus was by him betrayed. Yes, Jesus called them. Yes, Jesus called them. Yes, Jesus called them, and they all followed him. Now, pretty simple song, pretty simple melody, right? To be able to sing. And for those of you who are like, I didn't know that song, well, it's on YouTube now and Facebook. Go back and learn it. If you're a grandparent and you want your child to go to sleep and you're holding Rock'em, sing that song. I am convinced that's because of that song and songs like the books of the Bible that I can go through those books of the Bible and I can go through the apostles and sing through those. And as a result, I know those today. And I didn't mean to learn them. I just learned them. And I can tell you the fruits of the Spirit because of a song, not because I sat down and memorized those particular fruits, even though I think they kind of went hand in hand as they went through. Tonight, I want to look at one of the apostles, Nathanael. And you'll notice I have in parentheses under it Bartholomew because Bartholomew was the apostle listed in the first three Gospels, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. The synoptic Gospels, meaning very similar in the way they were written. John's Gospel is a little different. He really shows us the personality behind Jesus, really digs into who Jesus was as a compassionate person, his feelings. It's the book that we get the phrase or the verse, Jesus wept. So we get to see this softer side of who Jesus was. John is the one who talks about Jesus on the cross, and he looked at him and said, John, this is your mother. Mother, this is your child. Those moments were really reserved there. Even the resurrection of Lazarus, where we got to see that story. John's the one who does that. And in this case, John gives Nathanael his name. Now, I don't know that Nathanael, if he had something against the name Bartholomew, I feel like it had a lot to do with the audience that John was writing for more than anything. Now, that's just me taking a stab in the dark as to why he didn't use Bartholomew. But as you sing the song, I guess Bartholomew works better with the with the words than Nathanael does, but they're the same guy. And what I want to go through tonight and look at this particular apostle is first his meeting with Jesus and what that was like and what that meant and how it worked out for him. The idea that Nathanael or Bartholomew was one who was able to meet him, and it was a neat story because he was not in the immediate area. Well, he was close to the immediate area, but he came from Cana in Galilee. And you go, well, was he looking for Jesus? And we don't know this at the beginning of the story. It's not until later on in John 21 and verse 2 we find out that he was from this area or this region. But at this moment in time, it seems to be that he's having a bit of a crisis. And we're going to really look into this a little bit later on. But it's not because of Nathanael that he meets Jesus. As a matter of fact, it's because of his friend named Philip that he meets Jesus. If you look at your story there, as we're going to turn and look, we'll read through these verses here in just a second there in John chapter 1. But it's because of somebody else. How many of us know someone who really needs to meet Jesus? Probably all would raise our hand if we're honest with ourselves. And some of us maybe have already written the script and go, well, they don't want to know him. They know what I do every Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. If they really want to know him, all they got to do is ask. Philip didn't wait for Bartholomew to reach out or Nathanael to reach out and go, hey, if you ever run into somebody special you think I might want to know him, hey, tell them where I'm at. That wasn't how it worked. Let's start at verse 43 and let's read to the end of chapter 1 in John chapter 1. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now, let me pause and go back just a little bit. Just a few verses before, you see Jesus beginning to call his apostles. John is writing, and he's writing about John the Baptist and who Jesus was and how John had sort of carried the torch, if you would, to get things ready and said, "Behold, here's the Lamb." And in that moment, a couple of John's followers, one of them was Andrew, that's Peter's brother, followed Jesus, left John and went with Jesus. But in this moment here in verse 43, Jesus decided to go to Galilee, and he found Philip, and he said, "Follow me." Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him of whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Philip said to him, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming and said to him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." And Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" And Jesus answered, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." And Nathanael answered him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." And Jesus answered him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under a fig tree, do you believe? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." Now, in this moment, there's a couple of things I want to kind of bring to light. One is, obviously, Philip went and found his buddy and said to him, "We found the man. We have found the one whom Moses and the prophets wrote about, this Jesus of Nazareth." And we'll get to his response to that in just a second. Kind of unbelievable for him. But I want to bring to light that moment I was making a few moments ago, or that thought I was making a few moments ago. The idea that Philip went to Nathanael. If you do a little deeper dive into the whole Bible story here, there seems to be a moment where Nathanael is broken a little bit, where he's under this fig tree, and a lot of scholars have concluded that he was out there kind of alone on purpose, that he was out there frustrated with whatever life was piled upon him. And for Jesus to see him and acknowledge him, maybe we need to have our eyes open too to those who might need to know. And I also love Philip's response. When he pushes back and goes, "Anything good come out of Nazareth?" I mean, and by the way, I'm dripping that with sarcasm because maybe that's not how it was. Maybe he was genuinely questioning that, but it really feels as though he was legitimately thinking, there's no way that anything good. And Philip didn't come back with all the reasons why it was good. Do you notice how Philip came back? Come and see. Sometimes it's just that simple. You don't have to have all the answers. I've talked to people and I've encouraged people, and I've had people say this to me, and you probably heard it before too. If you hadn't, maybe you thought it. Man, I would love to have a conversation, but I just really don't know all the answers. I don't know the Bible like you do. I don't know how, if they ask those tough questions, I don't really know what I'm supposed to say. Philip summed it up pretty quick, doesn't he? Come and see. You get in those tough moments where somebody asks a question that you really don't know the answer to. I want to encourage you. I want to invite you to come see Jesus. I want you to meet Jesus. I want you to walk with him, and they start asking these really hard questions that you don't know the answer to. Come on and see. Let's look at the book. Let's talk about what the Scripture says. Let's dig into it together. Let's find somebody who might know, and let's look and see and study together. Here's what was amazing. We realize we're early on in Jesus' ministry, right? John doesn't waste, and I don't say waste, John doesn't spend any time on the birth of Jesus. He doesn't spend any time on the pilgrimage that Jesus made. He doesn't spend any time at all on all of that. He jumps right into the ministry. We're at the end of chapter 1 in the book of John. And here's one of the very first people to acknowledge he is the Son of God. What a moment. One that probably Nathanael didn't see coming that morning that he was asked to come and meet the Messiah. But now when you bring folks to Jesus, a lot of times Jesus brings skepticism. Now, I'm not saying he brings it. I mean that people immediately are skeptical of what might be brought or said. Here was his question, verse 45. Nazareth, can anything good come from there? There's some things about Nazareth we need to know. Number one, it was 55 miles north of Jerusalem. So, if we're thinking about it from, let's see, where would that be? It's 35 miles to Henderson, so I'm going to go on down another 20. We're going to head to Selmer. So maybe about 55 miles from Selmer up to Alamo. Okay? So we're 55 miles north of Jerusalem. We know that in this moment that this was a region where, I don't know if you remember back a few weeks ago, we talked about King Herod and we split Israel up. Well, this was the outer band up to the top and to that side, the one of the Herod's sons that really sort of got the leftovers, if you would. It wasn't a ton of Jewish people. It was more on the fringe of the country. He's up in that northern portion of Israel. But it's interesting to me, the town was considered a low-esteemed town. Now, I really thought about making a few Mississippi and Arkansas jokes, but I don't know who's in the audience that might be offended by those. So you just write your own joke here. No, I've heard, we talked years ago about the education system in Mississippi or in Arkansas or wherever you wanted to go. And I know in a lot of ways that's a joke and being funny, but I think sometimes there are folks who would feel, well, how could anything good come from that? How can anybody that would make a difference come from that area or that spot? And in this case, that is for sure what they were thinking. The idea that the Messiah would come from Nazareth, that this town, that this region, that this area, really? How many times in our lives have we maybe drawn the same conclusion based on where someone lives, or the status that they might have or not have, the color of their skin, or whatever reason you might come up with as to why you've decided that couldn't possibly be a spot where good could come. In this moment, as he brings skepticism, he also brings hope. Matthew said this about Jesus, and I find it interesting. Here's why. In the Old Testament, we got a lot of prophecies about Jesus. None of them specifically named Nazareth. Out of Bethlehem, out of Egypt, all of those places are named, but Nazareth is not named. And yet Matthew says this at the end of chapter 2 and verse 23. And he went up and lived in the city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken of the prophets might be fulfilled, that he would be called a Nazarene. Now, again, we can dig into that and see what it means, but I wonder, and I think a lot of scholars do the same thing, if you look at the 22nd Psalm, or if you look at Isaiah 53, you get a lot of language there about who Jesus was and who he would be. And in both of those places, you find that Jesus was not going to be you're not going to be drawn to him because of how good looking he was. You're not going to be drawn to him because of the money that he had. You weren't going to be drawn to it because of his father and his legacy and power that the father had. That was not what was going to draw you to him. Matter of fact, lowly would be the way it was described where he came from. And also in both of those scriptures, it says that mockery would happen at him. And here's Nathanael fulfilling that prophecy. How could something good come from Nazareth? Andrew read for us just a few moments ago how God works. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 27 and 28, God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even things that are not, to bring nothing things that are. Wow. Verse 29. So that no human being can boast in the presence of God. God works in different ways than we could possibly imagine. In this moment, we see as he calls Nathanael. And I find it interesting, this last part. I love this part of the story. Jesus knew. Jesus knew what Nathanael needed to hear. Let's go back to the text and look at this moment. I alluded to it just a few moments ago. Verse 47 and 48. Jesus saw Nathanael coming towards him and said, "Behold, an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. And Nathanael's response is, how do you know me? In this moment, like I said, I don't know what, I don't know why. There was something in Nathanael's mind, though, that he needed to hear. And in that moment, Jesus spoke it. It almost feels as though Nathanael had been discredited. Maybe his faith in the Jewish faith in Israel had been challenged. Maybe who he was as a person had been challenged. Maybe his credibility had been knocked. But when this rabbi, this teacher, this one sees him coming, and he says, I've been looking for you. Now, I realize that's not the wording there, but here is one that I know about. And he says, how do you know about me? When you were under that fig tree. Now, again, we're going to pause and think about this for just a second. Have you ever had a moment where you just needed to get away? You just had to separate from what was going on. And in this moment, Jesus sees him. That's not the first time in Scripture where God has seen somebody who has been kicked out, pushed to the side, reaches out to. Y'all remember Hagar? Remember Abraham and Sarah kick her out. She goes out and she cries and she separates herself from her son so that they can both die. And in that moment, in that crying, God comes and sees them and hears the cry. Y'all remember the story of the woman at the well in John chapter 4? All alone, all by herself, and God took notice. Those places where we feel like nobody notices me, nobody even sees. In this moment, it feels like Nathanael was sitting under that fig tree all by himself. And when Jesus sees him coming, he says, behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit. It changed his world. It changed his walk. Because from that point forward, verse 49 says he believed. And in verse 50 it says, because Jesus' response to his belief is because you have said, or because I've said to you that I saw you under the fig tree, you believe? And then he goes, you're fixing to see way greater stuff. Wow. What a moment. He refers back to something that every Jew would have already known. Y'all remember the story of Jacob's ladder? Where he's watching go up and down and up and down in this big cage fight that seems to take place in that moment. And he says, you get to see this too. You're fixing to watch this happen as well. Follow me. Tonight, Jesus called Nathanael. He could use him in a way that really was probably different than any way he could have used any of us. And yet, he can use you in a way that's different than maybe he could have used any of the rest of us in the room. And for those who say, well, I've been pushed away, I've been pushed aside, guess what? God sees you. God knows. He wants you. And for those of you who are saying, well, I don't know how to answer those tough questions, come and see. Just like Philip told Nathanael, come and see. The invitation is open. Jesus is tenderly calling. If you have need, please come to him as together we stand and sing.